Hey everyone, welcome to Get Scrappy. We're here for another year. Welcome to 2024 and really excited to have Sweta Govani here on the program today. Hey Sweta, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Sweta's a marketer and helps a lot of startups with their marketing and works with a lot of product folks. And I thought it'd be interesting in 2023, the focus of the show is mostly on product management and interviewing many product managers about how they do their job and some tactical advice they would offer. I thought, gosh, product is such a cross-functional gig. What if we spoke with different people that are in the functions adjacent to product? And first thing that came to mind was, of course, marketing, because product marketing and product management, I look at that as just being a really strong partnership. In fact, all of marketing, not just product marketing. And I know you know this space really, really well, Sweta. So super excited to have you on. I think it's going to add a lot to the show to chat with someone who isn't in product but works with a lot of product managers. So thanks again for being here.
Yes, such a pleasure to be here. Product people are some of my favorite people to work with, so this is fun. I'm excited.
Great. I'm sure that'll resonate with the audience as well. We're happy to hear that. Um, cool. So as we always do, let's start off with a little bit of an intro and learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. Yeah. So you mentioned this, so my background is in marketing. So I specialize in 0 to 1 marketing. And we can talk about that more if you'd like. Zero, I really think of as the startup has kind of decided we're going to start marketing. And that's sometimes pre-product, sometimes post-product, just depends on what the founders' kind of decisions are. And then 1 is what I think of as kind of we've figured out the business. So it's like what I call business market fit. Like we know how to grow this business, we know how to acquire good customers, we know how to retain them, and we know how to monetize them, right? It's like all three. And so that's what I think of as like business market fit. And that's what I work on now. I am a fractional VP. I also run something called the Founder-Led Marketing Club for founders who are running their own marketing. So imagine that, wearing all the hats. So that's what I do now. And in terms of my background, I have 15 years of marketing experience across those 3 aspects of marketing that I mentioned. So acquisition, retention, monetization. But largely for B2B and B2C subscription startups, with some marketplace experience as well. But a lot of my experience is actually in subscription. So a lot of what I might say may be most relevant to subscription businesses.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, tell me what else would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the 0 to 1 is really interesting to me too, because it really does strip away everything, and thinks about how do we apply marketing now to the business market fit, and how does that work alongside the product. And one thing I'm really interested to learn about you too is how have you interfaced with product management in the past? You mentioned it was your favorite group to work with. That was really nice to hear. And I imagine, a lot of that, especially in the early stages, is all right, well, how do we build a product now, or maybe even tailor the product around a specific market segment? So yeah, just curious, as you're getting started with founders, or maybe even, the first product manager in an organization, whoever that might be, what are some of the conversations you're having? What are some of the topics you're delving into?
Oh gosh, this is such a good question. When you asked the question at the beginning, I started to think back to the different type of product managers I've worked with at different companies. And um, my first experience with product managers was at a company that was later stage tech startup that actually IPO'd while I was there. So we had
Yeah.
lots of different products, lots of product managers managing different products. And luckily, my first experience was actually on a cross-functional team where we got to build and launch a product, which it doesn't always happen. Marketing doesn't always get included in that process, right? So it's kind of cool to really think about the launch strategy and incorporate that into the way that the product was built, which is so cool. It doesn't always happen. I didn't know that at the time, right? It's much younger. So that was really cool. And then since then, I've worked with a lot of product managers in different roles. But as you pointed out, my experience now is working with founders a lot. And the founder is the one who's wearing the product manager hat. Sometimes they have that product background, which is awesome. Sometimes they're figuring it out. They might be an engineer, maybe they're actually like not like totally non-technical background, right? Coming from like an industry expertise of something else, like in healthcare, you'll see like a doctor or a nurse, like will choose to start a business. I can imagine that. So it varies a lot, honestly, depending on kind of like the stage that the business is in. Like, what is this, the first product that you're building for the first time, or is it lots of different product, big product kind of org in there? Or is it a founder who's like wearing that that product manager hat? And I forgot to mention this. I did for a brief period of my life wear the product manager hat, but I cheated a bit because we had an outsourced engineering team. And so that came with a project manager. So she did like everything on the technical side, whereas I did everything on the customer and business side,
Okay.
which I falsely thought was like all product management is. Not, and I know that now. But it was fun. It was fun. But yeah, that's been kind of my experience. It really varies, honestly, a lot in terms of the experience that that person has, and also the stage of the startup or the number of products we're managing and things like that. Yeah, tell me what else would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to set a new record for going off script here. You ready? I'm looking at our what we talked about before recording here, and I'm going to already just veer way off the road.
Yeah.
Because as you were mentioning that, as you were talking about the relationship you have with the founder, the product team, just in general, interested in your opinion on this. Especially in the early stages, is the product sort of leading who your customer profile is, or your ideal customer profile, or is it no, we're going after this market and we're going to tailor the product to cater to that ideal customer profile? Like, which is the leading driver in your experiences, or from even what you learned, in exploring marketing? Does that? I don't know if that question makes any sense though.
It absolutely makes sense, and you won't like the answer, but it actually really depends on
Yeah.
on the founders. That's what I've noticed. It's, and actually I've had a lot of, particularly part of the founder-led marketing club, right? We have a lot of conversations about like just like what's going on, right? We're supporting each other. It's that safe space. And so a lot of them will tell me, I have a product background. The product work comes so easy to me. I'm terrified of marketing. I don't want to do marketing, right? Like that's a bigger, so as a founder, when you have all these things you need to get done, if you know your strength is in product, you're going to lean into product, just because all of us too, right? We're all humans. We're all going to lean into our strengths. Those are our instincts. So I think that happens naturally. So I see that a lot. I also, notoriously, people who do not have any experience in tech, so, any of the people outside of tech, especially tech startups,
Yeah.
when they build a tech startup, and I see this in my personal network a lot as well, when they build a tech startup, for some reason, I'm not sure if there's like media, or I'm not sure what causes it, but they will almost always over-index on product. They will always just build the product. They'll say, I'm the customer, I know the industry. Without talking to customers, I often see them investing significant amounts into building the product and then trying to do the market part of it. So that's kind of what I've seen. I'm over generalizing, but I think it just comes from just experience. You may have heard this phrase. They say first time founders focus on product, second time on distribution. So talking about the marketing side of things.
Yeah.
I think it's just the way the world works, is we don't know what we don't know. But yeah, you got to think about how to get your product into the hands of customers as soon as possible. There's also a lot of founders who are engineers or product people who've said to me, you should assume that whatever you build first, you're most likely literally going to have to scrap that code anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so
Yeah. A
that's
lot of
such
throwable
a,
code. Yeah.
I thought that was great advice. I'm trying to think back to who actually said it to me first, but I've had a couple of people say that to me. And I thought that was such a smart way to think about product, is just get something out there as soon as possible, because only the market would tell you.
Right.
So might as well get it out there. So I think, to answer your question, I think a lot of people do focus on the product first, but when you have experience and you're the second time, third time founder, you start to realize you should figure out the marketing side.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And there's that paradox out there, which is, and I just saw it recently. I won't reference from who. I mean, it's someone I respect a lot in the tech industry, but it was, we build for ourselves, and that's worked for us, right? The customers tend to like what we're building, or we'll go out and find customers that are experiencing the same problem and want the same solution that we're building. Or, and this is really built into the agile philosophy, right? We're going to talk to customers as we go and just build the least amount that we can to learn. And I
Yeah.
think what you had said earlier was really interesting. Like what you're seeing is, don't let me put words in your mouth, but maybe I think you used the word over-indexed, and I would maybe think about that as over-investing maybe in the product, and then saying, okay, we've got this very specific thing we've built. Now let's go find a market. Do I have that right? Let's go find the right customer segment that fits that thing we've built. And is it, I mean, do you feel like sometimes teams can pigeonhole themselves by doing that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I'll give you two examples where it worked and where it didn't, right? And I think it's up to the founder, right? That's as a leader, like that's what you have to figure out, which one of these two are you? So Figma, right? Everyone knows Figma, everyone loves Figma. Great story there, right? And some of this is conjecture, by the way, from like my research that I've done on their story, because I think it's so fascinating.
Sure.
But when they started off, so maybe I'll take a step back actually, and I'll say they, when I think about kind of what goes into what I call business market fit, right? Product is obviously one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But the other three, and this is helpful to kind of think about as like the fill in the blanks, right? So there's the product, and then the customer segments we're focused on. And then third is the positioning. So why would your customer segment pick your product over their alternatives? And then the fourth one is like what everyone thinks of as marketing. It's like the channels and tactics you're going to use, right? Like the things, marketing activities you're going to do. And when you think about that for Figma, when they started, this is again like conjecture, I did not work for Figma. But from their stories, what we know is that when they got into the market, when they started building, they actually figured out the positioning first. They said, we know that collaboration is a pain point for designers who are part of teams. And I felt that pain. I was on teams, right? Where I was working with designers and you're always looking at like old versions and like, oh, I like missed that email or you sent me the latest file. Like all that was happening. And it was very real. Like I remember that. And so that's the pain point that they were trying to solve for. So they knew that the positioning was we're going to go after in-house designers. So also they knew kind of like the customer segment they're going after, or the audience largely at least was the in-house designers who work on teams where they're collaborating, and that's a pain point, right? They had figured that out first, and that informs like the North Star for the product, right? It's like we need collaboration. And then Google Docs had come out before, so they knew it could be a browser-based tool, like browser-based collaboration was something that they could do. And that it was in that order that they went, right? And then they said, okay, but which customer segment are we going to pick within that we could focus on, that we could help?
Right.
And then they actually, their very first, because this is so interesting to me, the audience they ended up picking was influential designers on Twitter. And then they said, okay, well, what does that mean for like the original like product we're going to build? They have a well-funded startup, okay, like by a lot of standards. And so they had the luxury to say, well, we want to build this thing. We have this product vision and we have the time and money to do that, right? And so it worked for them to say, this is the positioning, this is what it means for the product, and we're going to make the other component like marketing decisions based on that. They could do that, right? And if, say none of that was true, say that they decided they were going to be revenue funded, they would have probably made very different decisions. They couldn't have waited to build a product that was perfect. That was amazing. Obviously, it wasn't perfect when I launched, but still, it was very significant, right? By the time that they got it into the hands, it was just different decisions that they would have made. I will say, credit where it's due, they did take a very community-driven approach and incorporated the designers into the process. That was a big part of their marketing and product strategy, which is like another like synergy.
Yeah.
But to give you an example where this didn't work, I won't tell you who it is, but there's a founder in my network who came to me and she said, well, I've invested, I believe it was somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 to build my product. And since then, I've been trying to do sales for it, and I have not been able to close a single sale. She's a product trying to find a market.
Yeah.
And it didn't work, right? From what I know, I don't think that has changed. So it doesn't always work, right? It doesn't always work to say, I'm going to go build this product because I know the problem. I believe I know the problem well enough, and you go build a product. I will say the one dramatic difference between those two stories was that Figma, like I said, did incorporate their customers, their target customers as part of their journey, whereas this founder did not. And it's because I think she had a big focus on, I want to get this product done, and then I'll figure out marketing, because she has a sales background and she thought, I'm good at sales, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But it hasn't worked from what I know. So I think the order varies a lot, but I would say what I will go on record to say is you should always talk to your customers. If you do no other marketing, have a hypothesis on who you think your target segment is going to be, and go talk to them and incorporate them into your product process, right? Like, do at least that part.
Well, let me take that a step further, because I think you're 100% right. Talking to customers is really important. But to go back a second, and this
Yeah.
is where I think your advice is going to be valuable for any product manager, not just, one who might be at a startup. I was at a dinner once when I was at Intuit, and it was this long table of product and business operations and marketing. And I wasn't even, I was on this side of the table having this conversation. I heard out of my, from the side, someone
Yeah.
in marketing, product marketing, his name's Greg. Greg, if you're watching, hi, he was a wonderful product marketing leader. And he said, marketing is strategy. And he just made that statement across, the whole table. And it's always stuck with me that that's so true. It's not so much, my experiences have been, a lot of my interfacing with product marketing is, okay, we built something, now let's go tell the sales team about it. And then let's go do a webinar or something, and that's valuable. You want to get it out there. As you mentioned, how do you distribute the product? How do you deliver it? How do you evangelize the product? All that is really great. But I think it's really, really critical to understand positioning, because, and please, we can argue this or debate this, but I think if you're a new PM at a company,
Yeah.
would it make sense for you? One of the first things you're doing is, yes, of course, learn the product, of course, go talk to customers, but also go talk to your marketing team about what is our positioning? Like, how are we trying to make our product different, or maybe less expensive, or cater to a different vertical, whatever that strategy might be? How is our product going to win? And I think it's hard for a product manager to know that on their own without talking to someone on the strategy side. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's such a good point. And one of the things that I do with the founders I work with, and I've done this even in roles when I, was in-house at bigger companies, and I think everyone should be on the same page and do this. So I would say, like, whether the product person does it themselves or partners with like marketing, sales, customer service, like include the team as you need to. What I like to do is map out those like fill in the blanks, right? Like, let's figure out like what's the customer segment we're focused on.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be, multiple like permutations of this, but at least know like this is the customer segment we're going after. This is the positioning, right? So like these are like implied in there is like, this is who we know that customer segments alternatives are, and this is why they're picking us. And it's not a feature list, right? Features are like
Right.
supporting
That's
that,
really
but
important. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's like, okay, well, they pick us because of like this main benefit that they're drawn to. And then that's why we should prioritize X, Y, and Z features to deliver that benefit, right? And I think having that is so beneficial, because those permutations, when we go through it, can be, and so I'll give you actually an example, right? So if I were at a just to summarize what I'm saying, right, is like figure that out with the team. And what might be true, depending on where the startup is in the journey, they may not have the answer to it, right? They may say, we actually have about 7 ideas. We think it's likely these 2 segments. This is what it means for the product, but we're not sure. And that's okay, but isn't that valuable for the product manager to
Yeah.
know that we might
Yeah.
actually end up going after this completely different segment, which has a completely different use case and benefit? That's pretty important to know, right? Like that
Yeah.
seems so massive to know, like this is where we are in that journey. Or if you hear from the founders and the marketers, you hear, actually, we're very sure we're going after this segment. This is why people pick us, right? That level of confidence that's there. The product decisions you make will probably vary so much based on whether the level of confidence we have about those other components, right? And that's something that I think is just like being able to say, for example, since we're not sure, if we just want to validate it, you might say, you know what, let's cut some corners to ship this thing really quickly to go validate that. And that's how product can support in that strategic work. Versus if we're pretty sure, then let's double down and do this right, right? Like this is totally different way of approaching product. And it just depends on where the startup is in the journey.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I can give some examples if that's helpful from like my own experience of having done this, but I really think when we go through this exercise of thinking about what are the segments, what's the positioning, and what does that then mean for the product, it's completely changes the way that the product team is able to show up and use their expertise to inform the product roadmap.
Yeah. And it's gonna sound like a loaded question, but maybe you can add more color to it. But
Sure.
you use the word validate, which I think is key because you really can't log on to I was gonna say Twitter, X, or LinkedIn today and not see something in the product world about continuous discovery. So to your point, saying, hey, here are 7 bets we think we want to make, or investigations we want to do, discovery, how aligned, here's my question, how aligned do the marketing team, is the marketing team running tests on the, in the marketing world, right? Maybe it's landing pages, maybe it's emails. The product team might be running tests, right? Where they're actually building features that don't have to be, high fidelity, complete, high
Yes.
quality products. How aligned should those two teams be to pull that off effectively? The
Yeah, I
testing
love
part.
that. That's such a good question. I love it. And I think honestly, this is gonna this I'm just gonna say it how it is, but I actually think asking that question is actually the strategic move to show up at meetings with, right? And say, okay, well, what is in our context, what is the fastest, most efficient way for us to validate that hypothesis, right? And sometimes the answer will be marketing, right? Marketing can say, well, we'll just go run, A/B tests for this landing page to validate it, if X, Y, and Z direction is even worth pursuing. We don't need to actually see if people want to use the product, but
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
right. And sometimes the product team might say, actually, you know what, we already have X number of users who use a feature very similar to it. We can probably build something pretty rapidly to see, if they use it and learn from that. And then marketing can say, okay, well, that then informs this new segment that we could go after. Right. So it's having those continuous conversations and saying, all right, well, if the business goal is that we want to grow by X percentage, or we know we want to, increase revenue or expand to a new segment, right? Start with that. And then based on that, we develop what are the hypotheses, the tests we want to run, experiments we want to run, and then figure out, okay, who can do this fastest in the most efficient way to validate what we need to validate, right? So doing that kind of top down, here's the goal, here's the ideas that we want to prioritize, and then figure out who does what, right? It sounds so simple, but I totally get why you asked the question, because it sometimes ends up being a function of who's in charge, who's running some of those decisions. But the more collaborative we can be, the most efficient it will be.
Yeah. And it's funny because I know before we hit record, you were asking me, well, I'm a 0 to 1 marketer, or, helping with marketing for 0 to 1 companies. And I said, I think there's a lot of overlap though. And just what you just talked about is spot on with all of the B2B enterprise companies that I've worked for. They're still doing exploration. They're still saying, hey, could I cross-sell this service or this product? Maybe there's a different, user segment. Maybe we can be more specific around which user segment or customer segment we want to go after. All of those things require testing. And I think you actually linked way back to what we had said before, where, yeah, is it the product that's informing marketing, or is it marketing that's informing product? And I think your answer was spot on. It could be either, right? Could be both. And what I've found, and one of the things that I've tried to get better, even in the way that I'm doing product management, is not handing the roadmap over to marketing. I think that is the cardinal sin of product managers, saying, here's my roadmap, enjoy, like go tell sales about it. It's happened at most places I've worked. It's anyway, I'm going on and on about it, but
Yes.
I think it's important for marketing and product to sit at a table and go, what should be on the roadmap? What kind of tests do we want to do? What do we know and what do we not know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's such a good summary. And the analogy I always use to describe what you're talking about, that relationship where, well, it depends, right? Is I think of it as like a Rubik's cube, right? So I think of like trying to achieve business market fit, which is always a moving target, like you're saying with the enterprise clients, right? You're always going to keep trying to achieve business market fit in new segments, right? In new markets. And so when you think about that and those like blanks that I gave you, right? The segment, the positioning, the channels, and the product, all of those, like when you change one, the rest of it changes. And so
Interesting.
building like awareness around, okay, well then which one are we going to move? And when we move that, how is that going to affect the rest, right? So what you just said about product coming and saying like, here's what we're going to build, that's actually then telling marketing, you have to figure out how to go and sell that. You have to go find the market for it.
Did
Right.
you?
That's what's happening because the company has made the decision that that product is holding steady. That's the piece we're going to prioritize. And it may be the right decision, but it may not. Right. And so having that kind of open conversation about, okay, we're trying to achieve this goal. We're trying to expand our business. We want to go, up market, or we want to go into this adjacent category. We want to capture that. And then saying, okay, well, what does that mean for the product roadmap? It makes more sense because you're going top down. Or what does that mean for marketing? If we know what we've seen, a ton of, I think the example you were giving about expanding a product right into the same segment. All
Yeah.
right, we're getting a ton of feedback from this segment that's really, performing really well. We have lots of ideas for product, expansions, right? Okay, giving that to the marketing team makes a lot of sense, right? Because we're saying we already know that that segment's doing really well for us, and we're trying to find new ways that we can increase revenue from that existing
Yeah.
segment. So
Yeah.
here's a bunch of product features that we can add, right? That could help you do that. That in that order, it makes sense to go to marketing and say, here's what we know we can do really well. What do you think? Like, can we work together on the launch plan for that, right? That makes sense in that order. So I think it depends on the business goals. And when you do that, and then you build a safe space for product and marketing to have, or sales, or other teams as well, to be part of that conversation and look at it as like this Rubik's Cube, and then being open to who makes the decisions and who runs with different experiments, you just create a space where you're more likely to solve that puzzle, right?
I'm tempted to pause the recording and recommend you hire a trademark lawyer to get that Rubik's Cube principle thing under your name. That's, I don't know if you heard that from somewhere, if you just made it up on the fly,
Oh,
but
I made it up. You know how I made it up was I was in a car with my nieces, and one of them was like trying to solve it. I was like,
that feels like my
oh,
job. Yeah.
I was like, that's exactly what I've been trying to
To
think
change one
about.
thing, and yeah, I love that. It's a great visual and a great way to think about it. So I know we're about to close here, which is a strange time to ask the first question that was on our script. You can tell I'm a terrible host, right? I'm
No,
finally
you're
getting to our
fantastic.
script here, but I'm dying to know. I haven't heard the term before, business market fit. I've heard product market fit. Could you explain a little bit around business market fit, please?
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I call it business market fit is because it goes back to that, what I was saying about, I started to kind of say, well, when we talk about product market fit, and by the way, I was following that for a long time, right? And I started saying, okay, we're trying to achieve product market fit. How do you measure it?
Yeah.
How do you operationalize it? And then I started asking, I also do some angel investments. I talked to a lot of other investors to try to understand, like, what do you look for when you're looking for a product market fit, right? Like, and ultimately, I kept hearing this thing, even from founders, even from employees who are considering working at a startup, right? I kept hearing, well, I just want to know if this is like a viable, real business, or if it's just, if it's going to go out of business zone, right? Like it's just a product, it's just an idea. And I thought, well, if that's what we're trying to do, then why don't we just call it business market fit? Because we're just trying to see if there's a real business here, not just an idea, not just a product, it's the business. And the product is, of course, an important part of it, right? That's why I sort of say, like, think of it as like those four components. A product is an important blank, like it's there, it's part of it, but it's not the only part, right? And it's kind of how I think about and sort of the other way to think about it is, I think a lot of times we think about product market fit as like, we've built a product customers love, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the
We're
mantra.
done. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're done. Um, and so I kind of say, okay, well, the mantra that I'm recommending for business market fit is like, we have a growing number of happy paying customers. And so I say that because I'm saying not only customers and users, but they're also happy, which means, yes, we built a product people love and we're retaining them and they're paying. We've figured out monetization. So, a lot of times I think products like Figma, Slack, right? Like a lot of products start as freemium. So a lot of times they're actually free for users for a long time.
Yeah.
And a lot of them may say that they've achieved product market fit, and maybe they have. But I would argue they've not achieved business market fit because they don't have any paying customers for a long time. So until you do, you don't have a real business yet. Like, you just don't.
Yeah.
And if you ask someone who's not in tech, right? If you ask someone in your family or friends, right? Like ask someone who's not in tech, they'll say, oh, yeah, that makes sense, of course, because that's how all normal businesses work. It's business 101. You have
Right.
customers who pay for your product. How revolutionary,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's just in tech where we think it's okay to have just users who churn all the time as like a viable thing to keep going for years at end. It's not how any other businesses work, right? So I just think of it as business market fit is where you figured out you've got a viable business, and this is a business worth investing time, energy, resources, money into. Whether you're a founder and you want to decide if you should keep going, whether you're an investor, if you're deciding if you want to invest in them, if you're an employee, you're deciding if you want to work for the startup or not. Just knowing like where the startup is in that journey. I obviously choose to work with startups pre-business market fit, right? So I'm saying like I'll help you get there. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I think having that awareness is important. And it's important even for product people because it informs the decisions we make about, what we're holding steady in that Rubik's Cube.
Do you recommend going after product market fit without even thinking about business market fit first, just to see if that can be achieved? Is it a linear thing, or are you kind of like, I need to know that both are going to work before we set out on this course?
Oh, I love that question. So I wrote about business market fit a little bit, and I can share a blog. And in that, I also linked out to two other blogs that I think are phenomenal resources, where one of them talks about 4 different types of fit, product market fit being one, and another one about 5 fits. So if anyone wants to like do more research on it, I think these are just like really interesting topics. And some people will say that you could go after one first, and actually many startups choose to. And I'm oversimplifying here, but what I've noticed is a lot of startups actually don't have the luxury to do that. So a lot of startups, if you're revenue funded or if you choose to be revenue funded, right, or if you're a bootstrap, you still haven't raised money, you may have to generate revenue, and you'll have to think about it holistically.
Yeah.
Whereas certain startups have the luxury of saying, we're going to focus on our product first, and then we'll figure out who we're going to sell to, which market we're going to go after. They've not even thought about whether they're going to be B2B or B2C, right? Like
Oh, wow.
they're like that open
Yeah.
site,
Yeah.
right? Because they've just chosen to go that path. I obviously have a bias towards thinking about it all holistically. And it's just what I've seen work in my career. Even when I worked for a product that was free, I joined pre-product and we knew it was going to be free. Having early hypotheses of how we were going to monetize that made massive impact on the product decisions that were made, right? Because we knew we actually were going to monetize the data from the free platform. And so there's a heavy emphasis on like the data infrastructure and thinking about ways that we can monetize that, right?
Yeah.
So I think I have a bias for saying like think about it all as I said, it's like the Rubik's Cube, like thinking about it. But if you have the luxury to focus on things one at a time, go for it.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. There's that grow at all costs type of mentality, and then we'll figure out the operational part later. But yeah, I was chatting with someone years ago, and their definition of product management was creating value and capturing value. How do we create value for the customer, but capture value on our side so that we're profitable, or at least hitting our commercial goals, which I think sort of fits along with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So Sweta, I really appreciate your time. I know we went way over, but I could probably go another half hour, if not more, chatting with you about this stuff. But yeah, thanks so much for bringing your expertise onto the show. And to summarize, I guess, let's just say you're a PM starting on your, in your first week, or maybe you've even been there for a while. Not sure about, what is the positioning? What does our customer look like? What kind of conversation should someone go and have tomorrow with their marketing team?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, marketing, sales, yeah, growth, right? Depending on the company. I would say like sit down and ask them, can you tell me a little bit about, what are their top down like goals we're trying to hit, right? What
Yeah.
are the growth targets we're trying to hit? What are the priorities for this quarter, this year, depending on how you're doing planning? Like, can you talk to me a little bit about, what we're prioritizing? And then based on that, can you tell me, fill in the blanks for me. Tell me which customer segments we're focusing on. Like, who are you focusing on? Who are you experimenting with? They might tell you, like, we're focused on this now, but we're considering X. And then what do you already know about the positioning for them, right? What do we already know? What have we validated versus what are some hypotheses? And yeah, and if you have a customer, you're lucky enough to have a customer service team, then ask them what kind of feedback you're getting from customers who are already using the product, and find out like the whole big picture, right? The whole holistic picture of top-down goals, marketing strategy, and feedback from existing customers. So you have all of that to then inform your product roadmap.
Love it. Sweta, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, John.
Take care.
Bye.